We're not?
Okay,
Unseat me.
so we're all set?
You've been unseated.
So we will call our regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning for Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 to order. Our first item is Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please rise, salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The hat back on. There we go. Okay. We have public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on something that is not on our agenda? Now is the time. Hearing and seeing none, we'll move into new business. We have our initial kickoff meeting with representatives from SLAM for the Plan of Conservation and Development. So without further ado, I will turn it over to,
Slam, I don't know if we do slam/planometrics or how we
Slam-
word this.
Slamometrics.
Slamometrics, okay.
Slamometrics.
Slamometrics.
Plan a slam.
Plan a slam.
Thanks everyone for having us tonight. We're really excited to be working with you all on this POCD update. I'll start by just doing team introductions. I'll introduce myself, Pat Gallagher with SLAM. I'll serve as your project manager for this project, so really your day-to-day contact. And Mike Zuba from SLAM as well will be our principal in charge. Mike and I have worked together for about 10 years and have worked on a few dozen of these POCDs. And Glenn, I'll let you introduce yourself, although you're a known entity around here.
Oh my gosh. I'm Glenn Chalder from Planometrics. Had the pleasure of working with the commission and the town on the prior or current Plan of Conservation and Development Main Street or Town Center rezoning, which was about 9 years ago, and most recently on the affordable housing plan. So I'm excited to be part of this and to team with Pat and Mike, because I think our skills blend very well for the work that we feel at South Windsor.
And I think it would be great just for us to get to know you all a little more, and so maybe we can go around the room, say your name, say how long you've been on the commission, and how long you've lived in South Windsor. Let's start over here.
Oh, okay, so I'm Atif Qureshi. I moved in South Windsor 2013, so it's gonna be about 10 years next year in March. And I think it's like, what, 6 months? Or a few months in the commission.
Carolyn Carey, I've lived in South Windsor for 19 years, and I've been on the commission like 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Well, since November 21, right? It's almost a year.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It's the COVID brand, so.
It's like, you know.
Time flies, yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Stephanie Dexter, I've been on planning and zoning for all of 8 years, maybe 9 with an alternate position. Been around since, in this town since 1985. I was trying to do the math quick, 20-some years, 25, 30 years. And really enjoy it, really enjoy working with everybody.
So I'm Steve Wagner. Actually started out, I moved to the town in '99. I think I started on the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2000, 2001. I was on that for 12 years, been on the council. I think I officially became a member of this body in 5 years ago, but also been on inland wetlands and one other thing.
sewer.
Energy.
Sewer, oh yeah, I'm the chair of the sewer commission, AKA Water Pollution Control Authority.
Next time, if there's any board you're not on. just-
Yeah, just to mention those, right?
I'm not on economic development,
They want to change that.
Bart Pasakonis, I've been on P&Z, I think over 20 years now. I moved to town in 1985, and a recent Main Street resident, been there about 3 years now. After doing that booklet on Main Street, I fell in love with Main Street, so I enjoy this commission a lot, and hopefully I'll be on for a little while longer. Michael?
Yeah, Michael LeBlanc. I moved here in 1979 as a kid. Finished in the school system here. I've been in town ever since. I'm one of these people that bought a house down the road from my parents. My parents moved out of town. Still there.
You're with
I've
the
been-
neighborhood, right?
So I've been in planning and zoning since I believe 2012. It's funny, I've been asked this recently and I really have no idea when I came on board. It's 2012 or
If you
13
guys report.
as an alternate, and I went through a couple election cycles, and here I am. I have a background in engineering. I worked at Condot for 35 years. I retired April 1st. I went to the dark side, and I work as a consultant like you guys.
The
So-
dark side.
It's an old joke, and it's funny. I've heard that when I first worked at Condot. This is 35 years ago, and people still say that. But anyway, so I went to the dark side like you guys, and I'm a consultant now, and I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
My name is Alan Cavagnaro. I've lived in the town all my life, the past 21 years. I've been on the commission for a year and a half so far. And I've been enjoying it, and I'm a junior at the University of Connecticut as well.
What are you studying?
Political science and urban and community studies.
Future urban planner, maybe?
We're working on it.
We'll pull him to the dark
Housing
side.
stuff, housing.
Paul Bernstein, I'm an alternate on the commission. Been on it, I want to say about 3.5 years, although I've lost track as well. Been a resident of South Windsor for 15 years, born and raised in Philadelphia, and lived in Washington, D.C. for about 20 years before coming to Connecticut.
Great. All right, well, nice to meet you all, and again, we're looking forward to working with you. So it looks like for most of you, this will actually be your first POCD update since you've been on the commission, although I'm sure you're all familiar with your current document. And so it'll be good to kind of get that mix of kind of newer perspectives as well as the institutional knowledge that folks like Bart have, being a longtime commission member. So also wanted to touch on our schedule tonight. I know it's probably a little tough to see on the board, but really we're dividing our work up into really 3 key phases, with kickoff and scoping being kind of the lead off of the project, and then the plan elements where we take a deeper dive at some data, focusing around the elements of sustainability, conservation, development, and infrastructure. And those first 2 tasks are really kind of what I like to call our analysis and our fact-finding stage. We're really taking a look at all the work you've done over the last 10 years, looking at state and federal data sets, and really getting a sense of, where is South Windsor as a community benchmarked to 2022, and where are we going? And then phase 3, the plan development, is really where we start to get into the fun, where we're looking at those more specific goals, objectives, strategies to help the town move towards its vision that it sees itself pursuing over the next decade and beyond. And that we really plan on starting either late next summer or next fall. And really the next several months are going to be that initial fact-finding stage. Task 4 is our community engagement task, and that's really going to start with our website launch, hopefully at the beginning of the new year, and then continue throughout the project. And we have community workshops planned. I'll get into those in a little more detail on the next slide, as well as an online survey. And then finally, PCC coordination, where we want to coordinate with you throughout the process at those key touch points. We're really looking at about an 18-month schedule, looking to wrap up no later than June 30th of 2024 to try to align with the fiscal year. Hopefully we can beat that by a little bit. Tentatively, we're looking at a May public hearing on adoption, leaving us a couple of weeks if we have any loose ends to button up for the final plan. So to get into a little more detail on the community outreach, as I mentioned, the project website is really going to be kind of our central repository. Use it to store project documents, but also publicize the survey, community workshops. And so that's going to be a collaborative effort where town staff is going to maintain it using the Esri Story Map platform, which I believe we showed some examples of that at our interview. And we'll be there to provide content and other kind of best practices that we've seen. And this will be continually updated throughout the project, working with Michelle and Thad, your GIS coordinator, who, from what I understand, is very, very good at the Story Map platform. So we're excited to work with him. And then probably our first major public outreach is going to be our community survey. And typically we like to do this pretty early in the process, but I know at the interview it came up that you're also doing a strategic planning process, and they're going to be doing a survey, and so we want to kind of be cognizant of timing so that we're not doing surveys in close, proximity to one another. People may get confused. It may impact turnout. And Michelle, I don't know if you have an update on when that's looking to go live.
I know that the committee is supposed to meet in December to review and hopefully finalize questions, so I would suspect it'd be during January that it would be conducted, my guess.
Okay.
Probably earlier January than later, but as soon as I know a date, I'll certainly share it with you.
Okay, and I'm thinking a couple months spacing might be sufficient to kind of have proper separation, and we'll be early enough in the process where I don't think that delay is going to set us back at all. I think really one of the things that we like to do is have the survey and have some time to process it before we have the first community workshop, because then we can really use that to hone in on some specific issues or priority areas that we saw in the survey. So tentatively, we have a visioning workshop scheduled for late spring. So if we were to do a survey launch in late March or early April, keep that open for about a month, and then maybe have a couple weeks to process that data. That would look at, perhaps a May of 2023 as the first community workshop date, where we can really start to, we'll have some initial data from all of our topical areas, and it's really about gathering that initial feedback on, what do people see as community strengths, what are some of the issues that they're concerned with, and then start to get some buy-in and synergy around a vision or value statement for the community. And then we'll use that information really to, as we start to develop some initial draft goals, objectives, and strategies. And then we're proposing a second workshop in early 2024. So if you think back to the schedule slide, we're looking at starting that plan development phase, the goals, objectives, strategies in late summer or early fall of 2023. And so once we have some initial ideas for that, we can, avoiding the holiday season, of course, vet those with the public before a draft plan is finalized and released, and really get some buy-in, or if there are any issues, it's a great chance for them to be aired before we have the draft plan finalized and out for that 65-day public comment period. And then after that draft plan is posted, we have the statutory 65-day public comment period, where it's basically a silent period. The plan can't be updated. It's really just a chance for the public to make sure that they're all viewing the same version. And then after that 65 days, we collect all of that feedback, and then the commission decides how they want to incorporate that feedback into the final plan, with the public hearing and adoption really being the culmination of that public comment period, where we really move from the draft plan to the final plan phase. Any questions on? Yeah.
I'm not asking the question, but I think the question ought to be answered. When we go out with our survey, I know I'm still confused with that in the strategic plan with this, and I think we ought to be very clear to people, what's the difference between this and the thing you answered 3 months ago? What's the difference between this and the strategic plan? It's almost awkward that we're doing both of these at the same time, so.
That's a great point, and yeah, we can certainly add an introduction section. We usually do a what is a POCD, but I think that's a great point of kind of adding some additional clarification on, how is this different? And I think we'll try hard to make sure that we don't have redundancy in questions, and knowing that you did a survey for the affordable housing plan too, right? We also maybe want to be sensitive to that. If folks answered questions on affordable housing, perhaps we take those out where we maybe would have included them. If you didn't have that survey so recently.
And there may be opportunity to build off the strategic plan, to be honest with you. The results might be at least in some preliminary stage. At least you'll know what the questions were. And there may be some follow-up or something like that for clarity.
Will we bring them in to talk to us?
Well, I'm on both committees. so as we move forward, I'm very cognizant, as is the strategic planning members, that we have this going on as well, so I mention it when I can. We'll keep you in the loop.
It's going to be a contest to see which one gets more.
No.
If we start now and get our survey out first, and then
Any other questions on community outreach? All Alright, so another thing, a housekeeping item we wanted to cover tonight is setting just a tentative schedule. We don't have to finalize it today, but talking with Michelle, we know that you guys are gonna have some busy agendas over the coming year, and so one of the ideas we had is to set a special meeting on the third Tuesday of the month. And we're not planning on it being every month throughout 2023, but we do have some touch points where we want to get in front of the commission, and having a clear agenda will certainly hopefully make it a more streamlined meeting for you all. I know the regular meetings can go along with applications and public hearings. And so this is just based on our schedule, what the tentative date or months would look like, where we would need to hold special meetings, if that's something that you want to pursue. And again, we like to avoid the summer months. We know people travel, and so we're planning on meeting at least twice in the spring, twice in the fall, and then 2 or 3 times in the winter of either 2023 or 2024. And we also have a floating meeting budgeted, knowing that things will always come up, whether we want to have that be on a specific topic, like the special focus area or something else. We have that kind of flex meeting should we need it. But is the special meeting something that you're all open to?
On the third Tuesday?
And this room is available for us to be able to use that evening, which is something we wanted to check on. And the other thing, the reason why I think we should be open to it is you do, and I'll be sharing with you later, you kind of a hefty schedule just to get text amendments, hopefully through public hearings the first part of the year, that this kind of lines up with when you should be taking a breath of hopefully having adopted some stuff, and then we'll be able to throw in this third meeting for that, because we may have to call a special meeting for these amendments as we move forward. The reality of it, so.
I do see a conflict, I think, in next November, because that's gonna be, the third Tuesday is
I don't think it's on the calendar, though. You're not.
our regular.
Okay. Yeah, so November of '23 is not on here at this
Yeah,
point in time, so
Okay.
Yeah.
perhaps we understood that. But I think with this schedule, we'll adapt to things that are going on with you guys. I think if we can kind of hold a concept date, and these meetings work best when there aren't applications and other stuff on the agenda or people in the room waiting for us to be done, and we get a chance to talk with you full-time and engage with you about planning topics, planning issues, get your feedback. And now we've got, key things that we can be working on. So I think they're designed to be strategic and important and valuable as we go.
And I would assume you'd be preparing us with materials a week ahead of time that we can send out, so everybody has an opportunity to look at stuff.
Yep, certainly.
So I remember from the last P O C D, I wasn't on planning and zoning, but I was on other organizations and participated at some level from those other organizations. So I guess at what point are we gonna see, Parks and Rec and other groups involved
Yeah,
here?
so let me go back to the schedule, and that's actually a good segue, because one of the exercises we want to pivot to tonight with you all is really that 2013 planning review. And what we're planning on doing for other boards and commissions and for staff is a questionnaire where we have questions specific to their commission, and also have them review any goals or objectives or strategies that were in their wheelhouse during the 2013 plan, and talk about any accomplishments that they've had over the last decade. And then we can follow up. Typically, we do this through the chairperson of that board or commission, and then they can kind of, there's different approaches. Some commissions like to look at it holistically together. Others, it's just, the chair is just going to share with us the information that he or she knows. But it allows that really initial engagement with them, let them know the process is going on, and then they can certainly be invited guests at the public workshops. I know they always have a ton of institutional knowledge that's great for us to leverage as part of the plan, and then certainly share the draft plan with them once it's developed as well. And we'll do a similar exercise with town staff, where again, we can pick their brain, what are the things that they're working on, what are the accomplishments, challenges, opportunities, and hopefully start to gather some of that institutional knowledge that the people that live it and breathe it on an everyday basis. All right, so we'll work, Michelle, with you to just kind of hold some dates for this.
I think we.
So really, we wanted to start the conversation tonight with the review of the 2013 plan, and I always like to start with what's been accomplished. And kind of organizing this around the plan themes. And starting with the conservation theme, you've actually accomplished quite a lot, including many of the major items that were in your last plan. The Main Street Preservation Study, which has a lot of great recommendations that I think this plan can support and enshrine. Your PDR program, which is something that we'll certainly want to know a little bit more about when we meet with town staff over the coming months. We know that you're going to be busy over the coming months working on updates to your subdivision and zoning regulations. And so, again, this is something that we'll work with you on and with staff on to see what changes are going to be made there. And what are some of the conservation related items related to your regulations that you guys have been discussing? If you're able to share that now, or is that premature?
You want me to take a shot at it? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, just like related to subdivisions particularly, I think some of the last open space subdivisions were kind of stretching the regulations a little bit and not really yielding the kind of lots that we were hoping for. They were more cookie cutter than creative. And I think it was just time to revisit them. So I think some of the new regulation, a little bit larger lots with some frontage changes and setback differences, how buildable lot gets calculated, is changing slightly, more tweaks than anything major in the subdivision regulations. I think inclusionary zoning and how that gets incorporated is probably the biggest thing across the board that we're looking at in our zoning residential subdivision and multifamily.
Other areas that we noticed when we were looking through your implementation plan, you made some progress on trails. You had 2 of your trail routes designated as state greenways. That's one of the criteria for state funding that they look at. You get some bonus points if it's a designated greenway. And then we know that you received a grant back in 2021 for the design of the Crosstown Trail. Michelle actually shared some plans with us earlier today that we'll take a look at and discuss more with staff when we meet with them in January. We know the open space plan was updated in 2019, and the target properties have also been updated. And is that something?
And that hasn't been totally codified yet, so that's something the Open Space Task Force still needs to do.
Got it. Okay. And
what their time is?
Yesterday, it needs to get done. So
No, but do they have a?
they need to get it to the town council, so it's months away, but it should happen in the next.
Would you do spring of 23?
Yeah, we could hope for that. Wouldn't you say, Bart, you're on the Open Space Task Force, you're pushing for it, I know you'd like to see
Yeah.
it, so.
Sooner
work is-
rather than later.
Sooner than later, so hopefully we'll do it spring,
So
summer.
we have the conservation elements sort of scheduled in. Our thought is to work with you on sort of the elements like are in the current plan and get those sequenced. So getting back to Steve's question, we're gonna interview people and get that sort of input. So when we bring booklets and materials to you, we're gonna have a cogent, comprehensive discussion. So we like to kind of approach them in the sequence we've described, but if it turns out that open space is, let's say, weeks away from issuing something, we might talk with you about kind of moving things around so that we are as current as possible on the kinds of issues that are coming up. So.
In connection with the Crosstown Trail, the same group that's working on the Crosstown Trail and actually applied for the Bissell Trail is also working on a biking and walking plan, which would be incorporated. It covers more trails and sidewalks and
is it the walk-in wheelways?
yeah, that's the walk-in one way, yeah,
And they're updating their townwide plan?
hopefully.
Yeah, we probably need to figure out what we're gonna do, because I don't really know how active that sidewalk plan is being updated. I know they did a lot of work on it, and we have it as a GIS layer, so we probably need to.
I beat them up at their last meeting for having to get re-engaged or engaged, so hopefully.
Okay, we just, we'll.
But they definitely appreciate your input and working with you.
Yeah, we've met with Jeannie several times and have a lot of data around that stuff, so
We
we'll
also
share that.
have the most recent Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which is updated in 2020 as well. So that's going to be something we'll review in detail and again codify. And I think one of the benefits of doing this holistic plan is that oftentimes when a specific commission or department is working on a plan, they're not necessarily taking that holistic townwide view. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of look at the plans not just individually, but look at some of the synergies. Are there some overlapping goals or objectives? Is there maybe some redundancies where we can foster some better coordination and collaboration. So certainly one of the aims of this project. And then the last kind of group, really more focused on farmland and parks. We know that you've made some improvements to the fairgrounds property. I believe it's a cricket pitch now.
Multiple things, but that's one of the
Yeah,
things.
which was cool seeing that on the aerial photographs. You know, maintaining your agricultural roots with several accomplishments, your expansion of the farmers market, moving to a different site on Nevers Road to accommodate more vendors, which is great, and more parking. And then the creation of a winter market as well, and then in tandem, modifying your zoning regulations for agritourism. And are there other things that any of you are aware of in the conservation realm that you need to be aware of?
There's actual open space purchases we probably wouldn't want, we could list
Yeah,
as well. There's a couple of them that happened over the last 10 years.
Okay.
Like,
I don't know
think of
which
the sledding.
section the recreational cannabis comes in, but somewhere in there we need to cite that.
Okay, yeah, that'll probably be in the development. And then also kind of taking a look at, I think probably the best way of framing this is, you know, thinking through some of your recent applications, are there any specific conservation-related issues that seem to be coming up frequently? Or any kind of changes in conservation priorities that you're aware of, that we should be aware of as we're kind of kicking off this process?
Michelle, how should we categorize Priest property? I mean, it was hot, you know, it was hot for a while, and, you know, now it's kind of, nobody's really meeting on it. Is that looking ahead, or is that looking back?
well, it's, you know, it's looking ahead. It's a property that the town owns it was purchased through open space funds, but there was a committee that we did a lot of work and spent money on getting plans for it along the lines of doing some kind of agricultural theme kind of thing. I can share that plan with you. It really, COVID hit when, and really nothing has happened in a long time on it. It's got an
Okay.
old house on it. That might be a community discussion, you know, that might be something that,
Thought I'd bring that one
Yeah.
No, that's great. This is exactly what we're here for, is to
Yeah,
kind of start to understand what are the goings on. You obviously all live in town, you live and breathe it, so. It's great.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it's funny, I just brought this up with Bart, but over at Evergreen Walk, they have this whole walking trail, and I ran there the other day.
you know, you're just showing
Sunday.
this guys that.
And it's 2 miles one end to the other, but there were a bunch of branches on the trail, that kind of thing. Is that town property, or
No,
is
it's
that private
Evergreen Walk.
sector?
It's Evergreen Walk, and actually the Master Association just 2 or 3 weeks ago had a group of staff and their folks, and they walked the trail, and there's a lot of maintenance that they're planning to do
Yeah,
to it. So
see-
it's an association,
Right, okay, that was my thought.
yeah.
And my thought was, well, geez, you know what? You may start seeing like private sector / public places actually merge or maybe speak together. And you're literally a stone's throw from
Yeah, I mean,
Wapping
that is
Park.
for public folks to use, so yeah.
Yeah, and if somehow those two could be linked together, that would be a huge access for the public. You would have a few miles of trails in there had they been linked.
Do you know if
But
there's
again, it's
any-
public versus private, but that's something I think that's coming up, at least in the,
Yeah, do you know if there's any
Conservation
access
world.
easements or anything along
There's
the
a
trail?
sewer easement that we have that goes out from the property to, which it's always been talked about a potential, but it's an easement, and whether or not you can put a trail on it.
Got it.
A lot of, some issues related to it, but there's some other, you know, we can take a look at a map and see if there's some other.
I mean, that whole trail was part of approval of their
Development plan.
development plans, so.
But if you
Some
recall.
of those trails actually connect up with one of the neighborhoods, not Smith Street,
yeah,
but
Smith Street, it
Wheeler
does
Road?
connect, yep.
there's another neighborhood
Right
in
back
there,
Yep.
that they connect up with, and I don't know where the Evergreen property stops, and,
The neighbors might be putting some connections in there, I don't know.
well, it's actually, you know, pretty well-used trail system back in there. If you don't just stick to the, you know, stores and behind the stores and apartments,
Yeah, I've ran into, well, not literally, but about 5 people were out there in the 2 hours I was out there.
But I do know they wanna enhance it and they wanna, you know, map it so that people in stores can know, you know, pick up a map and know where to park and maybe access it, so I think you'll see that becoming a much.
It's a great resource for the town, and I'd love to see more of that, but I'm thinking that's probably a trend when they get these, big, well, I
That's
don't
the
know what's
value of
left
a
for land,
plan
but.
too, because I think with our expertise working with Michelle and Thad, we can start to put the trails together on a map, and suddenly now we start to see gaps, like you see sidewalk gaps, and people can see the power of the vision, and that actually creates impetus now for trail connections, cooperating with others, et cetera. So this is just a great thing that you've put on our radar screen, and we can help accomplish this and move this forward, so.
And actually, I can share some perspective. When I was working for the town of Hebron, they have actually a very active greenways program, and they use easements as part of approval process to basically create these little linkages where then the town builds and maintains a trail on private property on a area that's part of the conservation easements. That may be something to evaluate as a potential strategy if you're having more of these larger plan developments, of kind of reserving certain areas, although it would have to be a discussion with Parks and Rec in terms of if that's something the town is willing to maintain if it were to become an actual public asset.
And that crosstown trail actually has generated interest from Ellington, and towns north of us who would like to connect someday to that.
As far as conservation, and I'm just gonna bring up Nevers Park, because there was a fairly recent failed referendum to develop some of that as active recreation instead of like passive recreation, which included a football, I don't know if you could call it a stadium, but
An all-purpose
bleachers
field.
yeah. And I'm wondering if that's something, I mean, I know that's Park and Rec really, but when we're talking about useful space in town, maybe we can work towards that a little.
Did the referendum pass or?
It failed
It failed
80
miserably.
to 20.
Okay, so I think we'll look into perhaps why it failed, what were the factors, but also a comprehensive sort of look at the adequacy of recreation fields and facilities in town and say, this is something that we should put on our radar screen, continue to work towards, et cetera. So we'll do more research on this and give you our thoughts and advice.
I mean, often that's a question we ask in the survey, more kind of a global of, what is the adequacy of, different community facilities. So fields is obviously one of them. And that I think is going to be a good first question of kind of what's people's perception on, does South Windsor have not enough, too many, or about the right amount of different kinds of fields. We can separate it out, rectangular fields, ball fields. And we can also cross-tab it, which is nice. I suspect that folks that have kids probably vote a little differently on something like that than folks that maybe don't. So that's something certainly we can dig into as well.
Okay. Anything else?
One of the conservation trends I think we've seen with open space subdivisions, it's just that open space subdivisions and creating some really nice corridors of land that's connected. And I think that's something we'd certainly want to keep doing and making sure we're looking at as any further areas get developed. There's a couple areas in town where it's farmland now, but it's not protected and may someday develop. So just being cognizant of that stuff.
Great. We'll try to get you out by 8:30, so we'll keep rolling.
No worries.
So moving on to our development theme, I think, as an outsider looking in, I think one of the major changes in South Windsor is just the amount of commercial and industrial development that you've seen over the last decade. This is just a side-by-side of the Evergreen Walk area between 2015, which is one of the earliest I could pull an aerial on our mapping software, and 2022, with the stars just showing the continued build-out that you've seen there. Mix of apartments, Costco coming in, senior housing, medical offices, and the like. So I think that was a pretty significant trend, really a larger scale commercial development that we've seen in most of the suburban towns that I've worked in Connecticut. I thought kind of an interesting way of looking at that is I took a look at the fiscal indicators report that the state puts out every year, which is data from not only South Windsor, but all 169 municipalities in Connecticut, and your commercial industrial utility portion of your grand list grew by about 3% between 2013 and 2020, which is the most recent data available. So certainly, I think one of the outcomes of the amount of development that you've seen over the last decade. And I thought that I'd kind of separate this out in between commercial and residential development, since I think the trends are they're related, but I think a little bit different. So some of the accomplishments that we saw looking through the implementation plan, zoning and sign regulation amendments. I think this is kind of an ongoing process of the commission where you're constantly making tweaks to the regulations based on feedback that you receive from the business community, which is great. Adopted a village district for the town center core, and then in tandem enhancing some of the bicycle and pedestrian requirements for that zone as well. And then turning that into an actual project with some of the sidewalk extensions in the town center that have been built, connecting all the way down to Evergreen Walk and enhancing that pedestrian connectivity. And then new zoning districts created in the Route 5 corridor, including your travel service zone and your north of Overlay zone. Did I miss anything or get anything wrong?
I think we added 2 other areas related to energy. We have a electric vehicle charging regulation, and we have a 2 solar regulations for small and large projects. The large has never been used, but a number of smaller projects have gone in as a result of that.
Got it. Okay, great. I'll actually touch on that a little bit later in sustainability.
Oh, okay.
So you jumped the gun, but that's all right. Housing is another area where I think we've seen some major changes. Since 2013, we're looking at about 500 new housing units and really a mix of housing types. Some larger single-family subdivisions as well as multifamily developments have gone in. So the chart on the right just shows the permit data from DECD since 2013 here on the right. The yellow being single-family, the red being multifamily. And then on the left are the individual projects that we've been tracking over the years with Michelle's help in our ongoing work with the school district. And so it's certainly a greater level of housing development than the town saw between the 2003 and 2013 plans, but really not that uncommon with what you saw in the late 90s and early 2000s, where you did see some pretty significant permit activity. And a mix of single-family and multifamily as well.
Different type of housing though.
Mm-hmm. Was that more kind of condominium?
Yeah, we saw, in the last, 7 years or 10 years, yeah, for sure.
And then on top of that, affordable housing plan adopted earlier in the year. Some mixed-use housing incorporated into the town center zoning regulations. Some consolidation of regulations eliminating senior residential design district.
Senior resident developments.
Development district. And then your ongoing efforts for the subdivision and zoning regulations. And it sounds like inclusionary and kind of taking some of the recommendations of the affordable housing plan to the next step will be one of the things that we'll be tracking over the coming months. So beyond inclusionary zoning, are there any other kind of major development trends that you're all seeing or kind of major things that have come up in your applications over the last few years?
All right. We started seeing things in groups, like 10 years ago was senior independent living. And everybody and their mother-in-law wanted to build one, right? Now in the last few years, it's been like gigantic warehouses that span like 25 acres or whatever they are, but you see these groups of things that come in, and obviously 20 years ago, retail was everything. I would think that would happen again. Whatever is in, all developers want to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good observation.
What happens is it becomes repetitive, and I don't think it's a good trend for the town. I'm not sure what we've turned down over time, but if you had 15 senior centers in the middle of town, I don't think that's really all that helpful. They should fan out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we see
So
with these
maintain a
trends.
healthy balance of different uses.
We also seem to have a bank for every household in the town.
We have a household for every other bank.
We have offices unoccupied, I
Is
know.
it full office develop,
I mean,
larger corporate, or
You
these
have a
kind of smaller?
Rockville Bank in the center of our town that's unoccupied.
Okay. I know that, some of the trends that we've seen especially in the last 2 or 3 years, has been office conversions, especially to housing. I know that that's a sensitive topic here, just given some of the infrastructure capacity issues with the schools. But I think that's certainly going to be something that we can look at and strategize with you on is, their office uses. Certainly the medical office, I think industry is very strong and it aligns well with your demographics. Some of the corporate, more corporate office trends, I think we're seeing some challenges and towns are often looking at ways of repurposing them because often they're in very strategic locations. So I think that's going to be a conversation is what's the right mix? Are there certain strategies that we target to certain areas of town? What are some of the considerations that we need to know about?
And another very specific example is on Route 5, the Mestec building, which is, everybody in town knows that eyesore. And what's gonna happen? What are we gonna do? Who owns that, Michelle? Does the town own that now?
No, it's privately owned,
it's
but
still
it
privately
does
owned?
have some hazardous issue, I mean, it's.
It's like a wrecker site,
Yeah.
It should be under blight.
Yeah.
Well, it does, I mean, we put under blight and then they take the graffiti off and they get out of blight and then we put them back under blight, so I can have her
It's
look
got
at it again.
graffiti back.
We've got graffiti back,
It's,
look at it
it
again.
looks like hell.
Looks like hell, I just drove
Is
by
their
it.
spelling getting better though?
It's a foreign language, you
Oh,
think.
no.
But as it was in 2013, our Route 5 area has multiple buildings that are
Yeah.
tired and have not had any attention. However, the flip side, and and I should have mentioned before, we've had, I want to say at least 4 or 5 applications come in where they've repurposed the site and made it look much better. We've had
Yes.
them pull up pavement, we've had them, I think there's one new building in the last 10 years on Route 5, but I can think of where the BMW motorcycle place is, they rehab that site, across the street, a couple sites. So
Okay.
we've had some accomplishments on Route 5, but I think Maztec is on Route 5, but we have a lot more to go.
How big is that site?
It's surprisingly not as large as you think, because the building, when you see the building, there's nothing behind it's developable. So it's like 515 John Fitch, you can Google it and take a look.
One of the other
Institutional knowledge,
She
right?
is, she's
We're
great.
also going to be doing a town tour with Michelle in January. I forgot to mention that. So we'll figure out where we're going on our itinerary.
So, under development, climate issues, is there climate resilience issues, or is that the next
Yes,
slide?
I do have sustainability, even though it wasn't a theme
Okay.
in your last plan. I did
All right,
notice
I'll
there
wait
was
for you then.
things sprinkled in, but that's a great point. Any other development-related trends?
What's the situation on the warehouse moratorium? I think I read in the paper that you recently did the refrigerated 4-story?
The climate control facility.
Correct, yes.
Storage facility, yeah. Again, regulations are hopefully gonna be being heard during the month of March. New text amendments that address a variety of issues.
And we heard cannabis before, so this is probably the right time to talk about that. Do you guys have a regulation or a moratorium in place now?
No, we have a regulation that allows hybrid facility.
Okay.
We have one current medicinal facility that was approved to expand their parking and become a hybrid facility. I have not heard from them since their approval, so I don't know if they're
Got it.
going forward with it or not.
Well, they're not one of the 9
Yeah.
sites that was approved.
They are, or they are?
They're not.
Okay, so then I guess they're not going forward yet.
Well, they probably go forward.
Was it
on those.
retail though, or I've had,
It was
There were
hybrid.
9
Hybrid.
hybrid.
hybrid,
On the
okay.
patch,
Yeah.
I've had people contact me looking in town, both for production and for potential retail sales, and I've given them our regulations, so, there's some interest, nobody's made application yet,
Do
but,
you allow the production uses?
yeah, in our industrial zone,
Ah.
yeah.
We did have an application for micro or mini or whatever production at a farm, and I think we declined on that one.
You didn't add that to your regulations at this
Yes.
time.
How's the micro?
It was
It was a
in a
farming
residential
residential.
I
zone.
was at that public hearing, I think we were
Yeah.
finishing up the affordable housing plan, you were there that night, so I
Yeah.
stuck around to listen.
So you,
Michelle, would this be a good time to bring up the developable acres that are over behind Hampton Inn in Manchester?
Joanne's,
no, it wouldn't be.
Ah.
It would be the perfect time to bring it up, yes.
Here.
That's the 50 acres that's behind Joanne Fabrics.
Yeah.
You talk about uses that, it's a design commercial zone, which, actually predates me, so it just tells you how old it is. And basically, the premise of the zone is it's a 30-acre development plan. You have to come in with commercial uses on 30 acres. very, very high coverage allowance and whatever. The history is maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, we changed it slightly, some of the requirements, but it would have been great for like Sam's or Costco or somebody like that way back in the day, but they're really not looking for sites anymore. So it's an interesting piece as to what, doesn't have any wetlands on it. It may have some birds
Who's the
that go through there. It's
Sarah's?
owned by,
Teachers Credit
a
Union?
credit union, but I think,
Out west.
Simon,
Simon Group?
whoever owns the property right next to it is involved in the ownership of it.
Okay.
I don't know if it's
So are
General
they
Growth,
land
but.
banking it?
Well, over the years, we always got calls that people would wanna do multifamily on it, and the commission was never interested in multifamily, so that's always been what people have wanted to do. It's very sensitive in that you have two residential areas very close by, all of our condos are to the west of it,
Yep.
and then you got Smith Street, a residential neighborhood, kind of sandwiched in between that and Evergreen Walk. But does have access onto Smith Street, it's got Wheeler Road, and Pleasant Valley, so it's got several, frontages and access points.
Yeah, and that certainly is something we can look at, potential special focus area, also potential workshop exercise, that we can incorporate, so we'll definitely.
Great highway access, you got, 84 is right there.
That's
and-
right.
Any infrastructure issues, sewer, water, pump stations?
No, I think that would probably go into Manchester, that location. We have an agreement with Manchester on some of our sewage. That piece may be a Manchester served piece.
Yeah, I
For
don't
some
have
reason,
the
I think
map
it may be.
memorized.
But we could look into that,
We
but
both-
But last time they were
Both
talking-
communities pump sewage into each other's plants, depending on where
it's some
gravity.
locations, yeah.
In favor of the gravity,
People would use it
But
as
it
parking lot.
is, always been slated as a development piece.
Are there any other kind of sites besides the one on Route 5 and the one behind Joanne Fabrics that you all see as kind of development priority sites or ones that warrant further discussion with the community?
The only other is the old golf course that
oh, yeah.
we haven't,
The Willowbrook Golf Course.
yeah.
It was an 18-hole executive course that went out of business maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago,
Oh, wow.
somewhere around there.
I'd say 5.
5, okay.
Does-
And so
does the
it's
restaurant
obviously
still work there?
sitting there, as a driving range that they did open this year, it has a restaurant on it. I don't think the restaurant opened or did open for a short period of time this year.
Maybe for banquet type.
Okay.
Are they
Another
maintaining the
Another
grass?
road that concerns me is Sullivan Avenue. I mean, it's peppered with holes with dilapidated properties and some places that are empty. I mean, some places look nice, but to me, it's like a junk road. Once you reach like the high school and you go towards Route 5, it's really
We should update our regulations for more aesthetically pleasing.
yeah. It
Because,
looks like the Berlin Turnpike when you head down to Berlin or Meriden on that way. It's
yeah,
just unsightly.
Can't
even,
access-
even new businesses that come in, there's no requirement really for them to update it aesthetically. I mean, it's a shame that there isn't, but we really need to, I think, kick it up a notch there.
The Burning Turnpike was the it place in the 90s.
In our current plan, there's the idea of a evolving road, revolving loan fund for economic development, things like upgrades and things like that. And it's always something that.
Are you guys
think about.
eligible for STEEP funds or no?
Steep funds, yes, not
Okay.
CDBG
Yeah, I know
funds.
some communities have used STEEP funds to seed a facade program. And then it becomes either a grant or a low interest loan. And often, to Bart's point, I think that's the hardest part is that it's easy to regulate for a new development coming in, but it's hard to, get desired outcomes for development that's not coming
No,
in.
it definitely is. It's a hardship.
Often the money
Yeah.
is the biggest challenge, and that's why I think some communities have just said, well, if we do a matching grant or a forgivable loan, it's the best way to achieve the outcome. So that's certainly something we can look at, or what are some other communities using for kind of beautification or facade.
The road cries out for sidewalk / multi-use path along there, people walking on there. I'm surprised we don't have more deaths.
I've never calculated things like lot coverage along the roadway. Is there opportunities to create development opportunities for the property owners?
Oh, there's development opportunity on Sullivan Ave. Redevelopment and development opportunity.
Yeah. Redevelopment's a big deal, I think, and especially those.
But even, you
Feynman,
know,
Sullivan.
just past the Geisler Plaza on the right-hand side, there's a pretty good-sized piece of property. I mean, you know, there's where R&L trucking area there, there's redevelopment opportunity, so you do have definitely redevelopment opportunity.
I hear you. It's like park sites over there, and they beautiful grounds. They drive by that building and they keep it top notch.
Yep.
And
Right
there's
next door
others
to
that
it's pretty
just don't
nice.
care. I mean, with South Windsor, so anybody who cuts through town, it's either Sullivan Avenue or it's Route 5, and that's what you see. And I don't think it sheds a good light on the town.
Any other development trends? Things we need to know about? All right. So moving on to infrastructure. So, I think one of your biggest accomplishments, you have 3 new elementary schools and the 4th new one on the way. I can't think of any other community in the state that has made that level of investment in their schools. Certainly, I think one of the contributing factors to your growing school enrollment. Your town council has adopted a complete streets policy.
That thing needs to be looked at for how we're actually implementing it.
What do you mean, there's sidewalks on Beelzebub, that's a complete
Yes.
street right there.
Doing a nice job.
I was up there today.
That's beautiful. But,
You gotta see it half full, Steve.
I think one of the challenges is, you know, your main roads are they're state controlled. And so I think that's gonna be, again, something maybe we can look at in terms of what are some of your peer communities doing. I know DOT leadership is changing, and so that might be kind of a ripe time to start looking at the things you ask for and the things maybe your legislators lobby for.
Yeah.
I know that's probably the most frustrating thing I hear from the towns I work in is the state is often not in alignment with kind of your desired development vision when it comes to state roads.
They're getting better. Again, I retired
Yeah.
from there in April, and the DOT has taken a green stance. The last 2 commissioners have been really bringing that into focus. They've done a lot of greenway work, and it's just getting their attention. And the best thing that works with DOT is not to spot check them, like you're gonna apply for 100 feet of sidewalk. Don't waste your time. You gotta go big or go home. If you're gonna put a mile of sidewalks on Sullivan Avenue, you'd have their ear.
Okay, got it. That's good to know.
You know, we've done some sidewalk linkages, some pretty significant ones that I could give you to add to that
Mhm.
list. I
Yeah,
think
that'd
are
be
worth
great.
knowing with community connections grants and things like that.
Great.
Do you have a sidewalk or pedestrian layer in your GIS?
Yeah, okay. That's the one that your group is working on, but I probably have access to the most current layer. Cause our dad keeps it updated, so.
Oh, that's great.
We know that you have some water system improvements on the Buckland Road corridor, as well as fiber optic lines extending to town buildings. Has there been any sewer expansions, Steve, that you're aware of over the last decade?
You probably wanna check out our ARPA funding page on our website, because there's a lot of stuff being done in the sewer arena, and there's some sidewalks being done, there's several different projects that are being
Like
done.
maintenance pump stations?
Lining the sewers,
We've
something.
been lining sewers, we've actually added sewer,
There's a link right
I think on, is it Miller?
Miller, yeah, it's a Miller, yeah, it's some sewer.
You know, minimal, but a certain amount, and then of course new neighborhoods, depending on whether they're, you know, the main arterial road or connector is sewer, then they'd go on the sewer, otherwise they're, so we don't really have a plan to extend sewer into additional neighborhoods.
We have a sewer plant. It's in the field.
Although the sewer treatment plant, I guess, was sized to do sewers throughout South Windsor, correct?
See, so we have an adopted plan that WPCA has adopted, right? And it's in your POCD of where we can sewer in town and where we can't sewer in town. And this comes down through the state, so, if part of this process, if there's opportunity that, you know, WPCA wants to look to change it, or we wanna look to change it, it would be, you know, whenever we changed it before, you have to go to your you look at your POCD, you gotta go OPM and go to DEEP, it's quite a process to change your sewer user areas, you have to justify it, But that may be something during this process that wants to be looked at by WPCA and the commission.
Yeah, I think Michelle brings up a good point. I think since the last plan, which is 2013, in 2015, the state statutes changed on the POCD. It said as part of the POCD process, you have to identify 3 areas. The first is existing areas served by sewers. So where are the lines in the ground?
On page 95 on the
Land
POCD.
expansions. And then the last is sewer limit line.
Yeah, here's our current, the current service potential and then sewer avoidance.
So I think we'd wanna just coordinate that map to make sure that we're on the same page, so to speak. So it's interesting, cause many towns approach it as a homologated area,
A blob.
right? Yeah, it's,
Well,
you've got going down a street, you've got individual
It w-
parcels that are cut out, which is like, wait a sec, what's?
Yeah, it was done through, who was hooked up to sewers, right? So if you're hooked up to sewers, you got colored,
Mhm.
your parcel did, so it was done that way. And so if you own 10 acres, your 10 acres got colored.
So that's what we may wanna coordinate effectively with sewage, in other words, so blue is current service,
Correct.
Especially the expansion
pink
areas
is
is always
potential, okay.
the dicey part. unfortunately, with that.
And what this map shows you is everything south of Pleasant Valley on Main
Mhm.
Street, for example, is a sewer avoidance area. You've got a lot of development potential there, so what does that mean for potential development if it's a sewer avoidance area?
Septic.
Correct, does that, I think the soils are gonna be good over there because you're close to,
Mhm.
the river and whatnot, but does it affect any development patterns you wanna look at and those kinds of
And
things?
oftentimes I like to do the sewer plan map and your future land use plan map concurrently, because the sewer plan is really your driver of density. And so many areas where you may have a sewer avoidance area carved out is, a lower density residential or, I'm not sure, I think all your commercial districts are probably sewered, but, similarly, we could do those density stratifications based on sewer as well.
There's a long history of how this map got to look like this that I don't really wanna make the whole group have to listen to, but it was back in the 2000s and it was through DEEP and my former predecessor that we got. We told them, we can sewer everywhere, and they said, no, you can't. And we had to come up with a map, and this is where it came from, and it was a lot of give and take at the time and having to show evidence that we've had sewers in areas for a long time that the state thinks we shouldn't have sewered, so we had to negotiate this map back in 2009. And so it hasn't changed significantly since then, but it certainly, this may be an opportunity to take a look at it, and it may make sense to sewer some areas that we know development's gonna occur, and but it looks funny for a reason.
Yep, thank you.
I gotta file about this quick.
Any other infrastructure related topics or areas that we should know about? You can think of? If you can't think of anything, that's fine.
One of the things, Steve, I know you've been bringing up through Energy Committee is, how do we bring some of those things into our regulations? Some of the topics of
I think
not requiring it so much as
if
encouraging.
you're getting to
incentives.
that, yeah.
That's a good segue.
Let's go back just one,
Yeah, I wanna-
just for a second.
Yeah.
Bridge on Pleasant Valley Road. They're talking about replacing that bridge right in front of the pool
Mhm.
of Veterans Memorial. And I'm just wondering, they still gotta come to us, I believe. Signs are up, or is that for
It's
inland
wetlands.
wetlands
It's in wetlands.
so far?
Yeah, they wouldn't come to planning and zoning. You don't typically approve road construction
I
projects.
thought the Main Street Bridge came before us.
It was 8-24 referral came to you.
Okay,
It doesn't come to you as a site plan.
right, okay. So who decides, like sidewalks on each side of the bridge? That type of stuff?
I believe sidewalks are going on one side of the bridge, but I really should defer to Jeff Doolittle on that. So I will have that answer for you.
Because it seems they should be on both sides.
Yeah, and
You know,
I may be telling you something that's not true,
Yeah.
so let me defer. Let me
Okay,
find out the facts and then I'll get them to you.
sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's a great point, and probably, again, another reason why it's great that this has kind of that 10,000-foot view where, we can kind of get all the collective needs together and make those connections. I know bridges is often an issue, again, with pedestrian linkages, you have the bridge not built wide enough, you can't retrofit it later. So to have that foresight to at least make it wide enough is a great point.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to bring up, I saw you had it on earlier, was the town center. And this is something that's been tossed around for, it's gotta be 25 years. And it never actually transpired. I guess it's more of a question than a statement, but what would it take to actually spur that and get that going? It seems like Evergreen Walk has taken the role of downtown, which I'd love to see it kind of come north where the town center actually is. But it seems like it's a lot of constraints for doing that. Between Stop and Shop, you have set aside land right on Sullivan Avenue. You're kind of cornered. There's really little you can do with it. It's just me looking at it. You're planners, I'm not. But I'd love to somehow see that come to light.
Well, there have been
Didn't we
some
do stuff? Yeah.
properties over on Ellington Road, like across from Stop and Shop, where Julie's Barks and Bubbles is.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
There's a few properties over there that have recently been sold
Oh,
for substantial amount of money. And you would think that would be the start of some development, but it's almost like they're taking a look and see attitude. Just
Interesting.
wait and see.
interesting. Because it's almost like that would be a spot like for transportation-oriented development, that type of thing, like mixed use, and that's my guess. That's what downtowns usually offer. It's a mixed set with offices, retail, restaurants, housing, expensive housing, cheaper housing.
Doesn't
Yeah,
our
that
town
is-
center zone?
We have the
And
big
and
overlay,
there may be an opportunity for us to revisit the town center zone.
Should be
and
looked at.
see what might need to be tweaked to make it more,
Because the density was changed, I mean.
yeah,
Yeah, all
and
that.
you're right, we have some new ownership out there. A lot of different reasons, different projects that may have been talked about didn't really come forward, but I think certainly through this process, we can certainly revisit our town center zoning and see, maybe we don't have the right mix or something's not
Yeah,
right.
what do they need
Talk with
to
some
want
people
it?
out there and see what they want to do, because I know there is interest. And I've told people that, hey, we got a new planning process coming up, making sure to include them in it so that they're aware of it.
And what do they need to make it attractive enough to actually do something?
What are their goals or how they, anybody that's bought in that area that I've had an opportunity to speak to has, been given a copy of our regulations and center goals and things like that. So I think people are on the same page as far as where we hope to head with it.
Because I've seen these things come up, like I always compare to Florida. My family has a house down there, and I'm down there enough. But in the town of Vero Beach, when you get towards I-95, they had a huge mall, and it looked like Manchester, right? A lot of that has emptied out because of the trends in retail. But there's been a shift to this downtown area, and the historic downtown of Vero Beach is like 2 blocks long. And the people down there zoned and redistricted that whole thing to extend it, and they fanned out a few blocks out. And they've redeveloped and renovated different new commercial buildings. There's gotta be 3 breweries there, there's restaurants, this whole place came to life in the last 3 years, and it's just astounding of what happened. But it's shocking and actually nice how they actually got together and did this. It's impressive.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things too we'll take a look at is pulling some of the market research available and kind of have that inform the discussion too. And I think Glenn and I share kind of a pragmatic approach to planning, especially on a visionary document like the POCD, where you want to dream big, but you want to make sure that you're also somewhat realistic.
Attract the younger crew.
Yeah.
Brewery and distillery.
Yeah, so I think the market data is going to be helpful to those conversations where we can kind of marry some of the wants with some of the market realities and kind of find a happy
People who
medium.
graduate should
So-
want to stay in South Windsor.
So that's an interesting thing that you just
No, that's
said,
great.
because as I'm listening to this conversation, kind of inherent, it seems to me, is the feeling that we want to look like Glastonbury or West Hartford. And while I think both those towns are fabulous and have, great town centers, I don't even know that this town lends itself to that. I don't know that it doesn't, but that would be something I'd be very curious about. And by the way, this referendum that came up before, about this field that failed. There was also an item on there for the town to buy the bank building. And the plan was to put a town center, a small one, but a town center behind that. And that building would become the replacement for this.
Okay.
Yeah, that's well said. And see, one thing, I think about this a lot, but if you go out to eat, for example, there's like 3 good restaurants in town. And you know, I get nice adult kids and you go out to Glastonbury or whatever. It's like you're always going out of town, like go out to dinner. And it's like this town is what,
West Hartford,
27,000
what is it,
people?
Blueback Square?
There should be more. I don't really understand why there isn't.
Is any of that planned to any of our regulations around like when we close? Cause like West Hartford, they're open, I think, later than we are.
You don't have a restriction on how late you can be open.
Okay.
Start charging for parking.
Yeah, that gets them in there.
But one of the things that West Hartford did was they already had sort of good bones in place.
Yes.
But at one point in time along the way, they realized that parking regulations on restaurants were stopping restaurants from opening, so they relaxed or eliminated parking requirements, and that's when it started to blossom. So regulations play an important role, but I think as part of our research work on the town center regulations about 9 years ago or so, it was the property ownership and particularly Stop and Shop that has a very long-term lease. And they're making money in the store. So they're not about to interrupt that unless there's some other way for them to sell groceries or whatever. So it's got its challenges, but I think we can put our heads together and try to figure out what other communities have done successfully and what are the opportunity areas. I'm keeping a rolling list on my notes of opportunity areas that we've talked about, and that'll be one of them.
Do we talk about like public transportation here or?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things I've heard is South Windsor does, I mean, I'm not saying we should have public transportation everywhere through the town. One of the things I've heard is we have limited, like, people have to walk, especially in low-income housing areas that we have, walk to get to buses and stuff.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's something that can be done about that.
So actually, we have a Transportation and Highway Commission, I don't know if I got the name right, but they're looking into a shuttle bus, electric shuttle bus to go up and down, basically up and down Sullivan Avenue with some branches, so.
Yeah, I have information on where our buses go, and they recently changed the bus route to accommodate the Home Depot Ellington Road, in the process of changing, I should say. And I sat on a committee for a long time, and, you know, Sullivan Ave, maybe one day we'll get a bus, but it doesn't have it, you know, being a suburban community, you know, having
Yeah.
bus routes be able to be expanded and not even be feasible, but just to make them be willing to do it with ridership
Especially the
is
way
hard to
we've got our
do.
residential areas where you kind of have to still walk to
Yeah,
get to a main.
yeah, so it's, you know, when you get off the main corridors, it's tough to get the Connecticut Transit kind of buses there, but something like what our mass transit district is hoping to do may be able to fill some of that gap, and we can certainly make sure you're informed on that.
Little things like the buses go down Main Street, and I don't think anybody gets on the bus there. You know, take that bus route and put it where it can be used.
And again, that's targeted to go down Route 5, but you know, when you go to change a bus route, you have to do a huge social justice study on it to make sure that when you change it, you haven't affected. And so changing bus routes don't happen real easily or readily, is what I learned.
I never quite understood that either.
But it's on a list, and it's
But
been
wherever we
identified.
have
you know,
apartment complexes or, you know, where it's
Dense,
low-income
yeah.
housing,
Density
low-income
housing.
housing and stuff, that's where they need it the most. And I've heard that people have to walk.
But I'll make sure we have the bus routes, you can see what they are.
For everybody, in your plan of conservation and development on page 81, there's a transportation plan which shows you roughly where the bus routes are. Like Michelle said, it's listed as desirable bus service for Sullivan Avenue, but not there yet. And you would think with all our commercial, industrial on there and,
And the path on the side of the road, you think, you know, that it was needed.
yeah.
That's probably the biggest gap. I mean,
You know, we had our first project approved using rail, which is something that is, you know, something we had as a goal in our
Which,
POCD previously.
Home Depot.
Home Depot.
are they any better?
I haven't had any complaints in my office recently, so I have to say.
Is that just because people stopped calling?
I don't think it's any better.
We should get a train service going, kids love
I do
riding
know
the
it's
train.
monitored through the police, so they were monitored.
Really?
Yeah.
I think people just do workarounds.
Alright, so our last topic covered, this wasn't its own section in your current plan, but it's something that we wanna break out and expand for this iteration, is sustainability. And some of Steve's comments earlier, we've have made some pretty good progress in this arena. Installing new LED lighting for your streetlights, adding your zoning amendments for small and large scale energy systems, your EV charging station regulations, which I think are one of the first of its kind and will be a model for other communities to use. You completed a hazard mitigation plan in 2018 as part of a regional effort. That always has some good recommendations that can be enshrined in your POCD, particularly around disaster preparedness. And then we also know that you have a municipal energy plan that was adopted in 2019 that we'll take a read through, and I hope that'll have some good information on energy in towns.
100% of our municipal electricity comes from solar,
That's great.
either in town or through virtual net metering.
Okay, that's excellent.
So
Sustainable CT, I mean, that, Michelle, that was an
we
I
accomplishment.
probably
were.
told them not to put it on
Oh,
there.
you probably did, all right. Well, I know
No,
that,
we expire this year,
Oh,
our
we do?
award does, yes, and
is
it
that
will.
something we should
You're volunteering to take over?
Yeah.
unexpire, or, no?
We'll talk offline on it.
All
I
right,
don't take up time here.
never mind.
So
That
where
was
does
on-
something like your social accomplishments come?
So that's a good question. I think that could fit in. It could be sustainability. To some
That's what I was
extent.
wondering.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was
What
just,
are you thinking?
we have a new committee that I think met last time for the Social Justice Committee, I'm not really sure what their title is.
I think equity-related items would
Yeah,
would
I
go
think
well
it-
with sustainability.
Well, if you look at the Sustainable Connecticut program, they've got a whole boatload of things, some of which overlap
I'll
other
get you the name of
sections
it.
here.
It escapes me right now, but I think it's worth recognizing the town has adopted.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if it's a group that we can send a questionnaire to, we can certainly follow up.
They're
with
just
them.
getting up and going. And an arts council too, we have, right? Didn't they just adopt an arts council, which we've never had, that I can recall,
So, yeah.
as a specific
Yeah,
arts council?
they haven't met yet either, but, Social Justice did meet last
Yeah,
night,
they did meet, yeah.
so that's
So I
a
just
start.
think that those are things worth at least
Yeah.
noting.
There's some vacancies in some of these things, right?
Yes.
Maybe as we talk about them, more people
Yeah.
will wanna know more about it.
That could be a survey question.
Mhm.
Are you interested in serving on
Go to this link, sign up.
I know that that's one of the challenges with many towns these days is, starting to see some of that generational turnover of board and commission members and having vacancies, so I can certainly relate to the challenge there. And just wanted to end tonight on the potential focus areas that we discussed in our interview. I know we had a chance to have some conversation on all of these items. So just from kind of our outside looking in perspective, some of the areas we had kind of highlighted were sustainability and resiliency, obviously, as something to expand on and really give its own theme here for this plan. Housing dynamics, really that balance between your school capacity and infrastructure capacity with the need for new housing, as well as some of the affordable housing recommendations out of the affordable housing plan. Community facility capacity, again, kind of goes down both schools, but also now that you're finishing up your school master plan, what are some of the other needs beyond schools that the community may need, whether that's athletic fields or other infrastructure. Economic development, whether that's a specific site. I think one of the things we had talked about is when we talk about economic development, what is really our goal? Is our goal to grow the commercial portion of the tax base? Is our goal to grow the number of jobs? Is our goal to increase access to goods and services for residents? So I think there's some competing objectives that we'll want to wean through as we go through a process. And then again, taking a deeper dive on some of those sites that we had talked about tonight as potential opportunity or growth areas. And so again, this is just kind of an initial gut check for us of are there any other things that, from your conversations with your neighbors or constituents that we need to be aware of so that we can, when we talk to your boards and commissions and staff, we're asking them the right questions.
Well, I think I mean, sustainability covers so many things, but I mean, the whole area of climate change, I think needs a lot of, you know, how are we trying to do our share? Where is climate change likely to affect us? You know, can we sustain the kind of farming that we're sustaining now, or are we gonna turn into a desert? You know, probably not, but I think a look at the resiliency part of climate change, I think, and how it might affect us. I mean, we're probably pretty lucky. You know, I mean, I see us being less affected than a lot of other places in the country, but we probably ought to ask the question at least. You know, are we gonna see bigger floods? You know, you know, is our 100-year flood area the 5-year flood area now? You know,
I think a lot of communities are grasping with not necessarily riverine flooding, but urban flooding from heavy rainfall.
Yeah.
That's not really captured in your FEMA maps.
yeah, and I mean, I know of one street actually on Evergreen Crossing. You know, the bottom of Kent Lane.
Evans Crossing?
Evans Crossing, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, the sewers there in a heavy rain period will actually, you know, the water comes bursting out of the storm sewers in that area. So our infrastructure is not really designed for the kind of weather we're gonna have.
Yeah, that was all patched together over the years.
Mhm.
I remember when I first moved to town, that was all like new development in phases that crept northward,
Yeah,
and they just kept adding to it.
I mean, they've just, you know, I mean, there's still a bunch of houses down there getting their foundations replaced, and now they're gonna continue to have flooding from the inadequate storm sewers that were, I mean,
It's just probably
I mean,
haphazard design.
some of them, the houses actually are draining into the storm sewer, you know, just,
And along those lines, we have a great border with the Connecticut River. And, you know, what can we look to do in the next 10 years to either protect ourselves from that overflowing or the use of it
Yep.
socially? I mean, I know we've got a little ramp that is underwater most of the time. I mean, it's,
There was a grant that the Parks and Recreation Department just received like 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And it's to study getting access to the Scantic, because we just picked up some land.
right.
And it may spill over to
the
the
river.
boat landing area too, but it's something that you certainly will wanna
Yeah,
look in and find out more
that
about.
would be great.
so we have, what, 1,500 feet along the river that we actually own, and we'd like to have that path go all the way the length of town, I think.
I know, I'd love to see that someday.
That's something
Thanks for
that
bringing that up.
some people have mentioned to me about development down at our boat launch, town-owned property down there. But it's also where our wastewater treatment plant dumps into the Connecticut River. But, right. Actually, you know,
It
there's
floods
sturgeon
now.
down there and everything. And, you know, you're not eating sturgeon. I wonder what they're eating, but,
I think you have a misconception about
That's
what's
what they
coming
want
out of the
there,
sewer
though.
plant. There's actually two different flows from that area. One is just stormwater, and that can get muddy at times and everything, but it's just stormwater. And then the sewer plant is basically putting drinkable water into
That's
the
right.
river.
That's right.
So,
Alright.
you know, I wouldn't worry about the sturgeon and what they're drinking or eating.
Yeah. See,
but, like was mentioned, we have a boat ramp. And for like maybe a month or two in the summertime, you can't use it because it only goes so far and the river dries up and you're trying to put your boat into mud. It doesn't work. Now, that's also possibly a public safety issue because if there's a river rescue that has to happen, I would think that would be the access to the river.
Yeah,
So I think it's something that should probably be looked at
so my,
sometime.
oh, yeah, see, my thought too, and I always thought it was a generation away, but all the surrounding towns around us, like Manchester has Case Mountain, Vernon's got Valley Falls, I mean, a lot of these towns have these big chunks of land that for recreational use. And we have this whole river that runs by the side of the town and it's inaccessible. I guess probably because most of it's privately owned. But gee, when that stuff goes up for sale or something, I'd somehow carve a swath through that for the town to use. That's such an asset for South Windsor, and it's completely hidden from the town. What, 1,600 feet,
Glastonbury
what's that gonna
did
get
was
you?
amazing. Glastonbury's park down there
Yeah,
on the river.
Great
is
River Park,
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
people, you got 100 people there every day,
yeah,
you know,
Just walking
at
along
any
the
one
river.
time.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And they also hold events and,
right.
yeah.
It's such a great asset.
Right, that's it.
So
I'd love to see that.
in the area of infrastructure, and this may be out of scope for this project, but with the frequency and intensity of storms, you know, getting more and more severe, and to Steve's point, 100-year storms are gonna happen every 5 years. Can we do anything to better secure our electrical grid? I know right now I lose power regularly with, you know, even a small storm.
Really?
And with larger and larger storms and the immense number of trees and branches that are hanging over lines, it just seems like, you know, we're looking at some real challenges. And I mean, I don't know if that's an Eversource thing or if that's something we can address.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from a town, I think there are some town policies that could impact it. I know your local road, you probably have some sort of tree trimming program in coordination with Eversource. For your zoning regulations, new development has underground utilities for the
Yeah.
most part?
Yep.
Okay, so that's obviously one area. And then another area that I think a lot of communities are focusing on is backup power at critical facilities. That's often highlighted in your hazard mitigation plan, whether that's your designated shelters, which are usually your schools or a town hall, but it also could be gas stations, medical facilities, and other things. So oftentimes there's grant monies that towns can apply for to help bridge that gap. But that's definitely something we'll look at as we're reviewing the hazard mitigation plan. They may have some recommendations to that effect.
There are things you can also do to make the grid accommodate the larger number of electric vehicles. Right now, we're in a situation where if everybody bought an electric vehicle, the grid would collapse. On the other hand, if you put storage with those electric vehicles, you know, solar and storage, you can actually not have to rebuild the grid just to put a solar in an electric car in every garage. So maybe looking at, you know, what are we doing to encourage the kind of infrastructure, local, very local, micro infrastructure that would make the grid more sustainable. It's still, like you said, an Eversource thing for the most part, but we play a role, I think.
This could be our first time playing with fusion in it.
That's right, we had radio yesterday, yeah.
There's one thing I noticed when you look at the town with the open space and you have these little swaths of land that cut through town, especially around Avery Street on the east side. This is something theory I had, that a lot of these little pockets of land can be connected somehow for the trail system. And I realize that there's a crosstown trail, I guess it's underneath Eversource's power lines, which they basically paved themselves to bring their own wires out there, but these little pockets starting up on Niederwerfer Road, it comes all the way past Philip R. Smith School and it heads south. And these little individual pieces of land and nothing really goes through it. And if somehow that stuff could be connected you would get a 3-mile trail out of that.
Yeah, actually, the Walk and Wheelways people,
Yeah,
we
but
hiked
look
that
at-
thing
right.
from, I think, Caldwell all the
What
way down
page
to
is that?
Elizabeth.
Michael,
This is page,
it'll be on the other side here.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, page 37. What Bart showed us, like all these open space pieces, and you see a lot of them really link up, or it's not hard to do.
Look at page 85 too.
That would offer
oh,
probably
85 's
some
a good
trail
one too.
system. Because the
85
reason I
has a
say
walk.
that, because I explore these places and you'll see one section, oh yeah, there's a great trail in here, and I'll run on it, it's a half mile
Yeah.
long, and it comes to somebody's backyard, you turn around and go out. You go around that house, and here's
They're
another
pretty
one.
much the same.
But looking at the future, the town should look at that, and that's where you get the private development part where it's quasi-public-private,
Mhm.
because you get a right-of-way through some property that no
Yeah.
one's using. Now you can do that.
That's a great point.
So the challenge sometimes on this is that there comes a transition working with communities where at an early stage, they favor, for example, the river edge has a greenway along the river. It's not particularly specific, it shows the concept. Then later on, as we get towards implementation, for example, we have this plan with Eversource now, and it's got the detailed path underneath the electric wires. Sometimes when you get into neighborhoods, commissions and people, residents start to get nervous about specific properties. And so the timing to make that transition from a general aspirational vision to a more concrete implementable plan is really up to you guys in terms of the guidance you want to give us. So we can explore that and talk about it, but I think clearly I've gotten the sense here from the work you guys have done the last 10 years, the plans that have been created and the discussion here tonight, that pedestrian, walking, sidewalks, pathways, et cetera, are an area of interest and focus as part of this planning effort, and that's nice to see.
Yeah, I think something we may need to be a little careful of is the Crosstown Trail is just beginning to go out to abutters, and there are actually some private properties that we're gonna ask for easements on. I wanna just be careful we don't step on that. Now, hopefully that'll happen before we get too far into this plan, but,
I can tell a funny story. Used to be the town planner in Avon many years ago. There were efforts afoot after I was planner to create the Farmington Valley Rail Trail.
Mhm.
And a citizen became quite active with the council and showed up at meetings and insisted on essentially a stockade fence that would separate the rear of their property from the trail because, you never know who's gonna walk on the trail. And so the council did that as part of the installation of the trail. About 5 years later, this person went to sell their property and the requirement from the buyer was they had to have a gate to the trail.
Yep.
So the same guy had to go back to the council and ask permission to put a gate in, so.
you go on these trails and you see people put little bridges which are totally unsafe across whatever drainage
Get a
ditch
wetlands
there.
permit for it. But this is the power, if you will, of a vision, and we first get to taste the vision, and people want more of it. So even the discussion we were having about at Evergreen Walk with the wood chip pathway,
Yeah.
if it shows as part of the system and people start to realize it can start to go all on its own, goes viral, I guess.
Just need some TikTok.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, I think that's it for our presentation. Any other kind of thoughts or ideas you want to share with us as we kind of?
Yeah, I had a couple. So this is out of left field, but in the area of recreation, I think if you, when you do your survey, if you were to ask questions such as, what are the 2 or 3 recreational type things that you would like to see, I think what you're gonna find an indoor swimming pool will be number 1. Because I've seen that in surveys in the past. It's something that a lot of people just seem to want. So I wanna switch back to the outreach efforts. What's the mechanism that you're going to use for the surveys?
So we use SurveyMonkey typically for these.
All right, so the email, so you're doing email,
Yep, and then
and how is that targeted? Do you have an email list that you buy, or?
so what we do is we rely on the town to basically be our publicist. So what we recommend is leveraging town databases. It's not gonna be a statistically valid telephone survey, for example, where you have a list that you buy from a company. We always recommend putting a press release or a news story in your local paper. That would be the Journal Inquirer, or if you have a little more local paper here. We find that either email blasts or the news stories tend to be the most successful at driving traffic. And then we can supplement that with some paper copies at your senior center or at the library, for the folks that may not have access to technology.
The reason I bring it up is, so the issue it came up earlier about there being confusion between ours and the Strategic Planning Committee. There's 10,000 households in this town. I will tell you from my marketing experience that 300 surveys, completed surveys, is statistically significant. you can target different people and mitigate confusion that way. So that could be a solution to that issue. I don't know what your goal is for a number of responses, completed responses. The other thing I just wanted to ask about is there a communication component to any of this? And let me give you the context for that question. So I don't know about the other commissioners, but as I'm out and about and I talk to people and I happen to mention that I'm on planning and zoning, there's a lot of perception that we make the decisions about what gets developed, what doesn't get developed. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, can you open an Arby's here? And I try to explain what the process is. I would really like there to be some way, shape, or form, and I'll write the narrative for explaining how this commission works, what we do, what we don't do, you know, how developers, just the whole piece. And I would love that to be part of whatever we do in communicating out to the town.
Yeah, so what we always like to do for the project website is the landing page is basically what is a plan of conservation and development. To that point of, you know, we want to educate people on what the plan is and what it isn't, and kind of set the context. This may not necessarily do as a deep dive on kind of what you do as a commission on the land use application side, but certainly I'm sure if you wanted to have kind of an FAQ or something like that to put on a website, that would be something to run through Michelle. But I completely agree of having that that information kind of as your landing page is critical because, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I've seen POCDs go off the rails because other consultants may ask people what they want without providing any context.
Right.
You get all these crazy ideas, and then at the end of the day, the plan doesn't recommend any of them, and then people feel a little upset. That
Yeah, where is it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely something we'll take seriously as part of the website.
Since you mentioned the swimming pool, I think lighted fields are also a big gap for us. And there's a lot of history there which we can go through.
You and I heard surveys, yeah.
So I think the methodology that we use for the affordable housing survey got about 900 responses.
Right.
So I think we're optimistic that we can, now housing, it was,
We'd also wanna put some in there that we could check against our census, right? I mean, could we put some demographic data so that we can kind of see if we reached our community a little bit?
Stratified survey,
Each
yeah.
household type is
Yeah, we can like put 5 or 6 male, female, you know, just to see that we didn't get like 25%, 75, you know. We could at
All
least be able to say
seniors,
something
all-
about,
That helps us, you know, what we usually do is after about a week or two of running the survey, we'll look at the demographic questions and say, which groups are we struggling to reach? And then we can kind of adjust on the fly, you know, if we're having a hard time getting families with children, then maybe we can reach out to the superintendent or Parks and Rec that may have, you know, email lists that have more families with kids. So that's a great way of doing it, having those leading questions. So we can see.
What about direct mail? I mean, I know the town in the past has sent out letters to everybody for whatever, costs a lot of money.
Costs a lot of money. It's not in the budget.
I've done it multiple times. And there's several $1,000s associated just with the mailing cost of it. And then the printing cost and then then the data, well, of course it would be different now, you probably make them go to a website and do it, but data entry.
Well, I'm talking direct mail to tell people to go log in.
Postcard to every household?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
We-
that.
We've got our 2 billboards,
You know, seriously, I mean, we'll be
Yeah.
advertising on that, sure.
and they'll be, it
All the
should be all
electronic
over
ones.
Facebook.
yeah, I'm in the middle right now of doing a bulk mail permit. So I'll let you know
Okay,
what the results are in terms of that, but I think nowadays, sometimes you get a real push from Patch, from social media for other types of events. So I'll have firsthand knowledge recently about what a direct mail postcard does. And we'll see a good bump from it, but the cost-benefit ratio is something to be considered because 10,000 households or so, plus the printing cost, it is not inexpensive. So we didn't factor that in our budget, but I mean, I'll let you know and we'll figure it out.
It's gotta be $1 a buck a household.
It's
I have,
less than that.
I
yeah.
have another
That's
option
awesome.
that I could talk to you guys offline about.
I mean,
So we're a little past 8:30
two
for your
campaigns.
birthday
I
celebration.
can give you pretty good estimates for me.
We're close though.
I got my questions answered.
So when would our next meeting be?
Yeah, what's
So-
next?
Yeah. So we're having our next meeting scheduled for April, and what I think we'll do is really January. I think is going to be a working month for us as we meet with town staff, do our board and commission questionnaires, and I think our goal would be to launch the survey around the time of the April meeting. And what we'll do is make sure that before we launch anything, we'll get a draft survey to Michelle, and perhaps it could be something for an agenda,
Yeah,
regular
circulate-
PDC meeting.
yeah,
And
so you guys see what it
that'll be
is,
more of an internal session with you all, and then we can incorporate any of that feedback. And I think our goal is to have that first meeting focused on a big picture visioning as well as sustainability and resiliency. So we'll be kind of crunching some data behind the scenes.
Are we gonna have a subcommittee that works with you?
I think we had decided the whole commission was gonna meet on it. The question I had for any of the survey that's going to the different commissions, would we see that as draft before that goes out? Well, yeah, I think that just, I would feel more comfortable that these guys knew what was going on with anybody before it went out. Okay.
Maybe there is one, February, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we can always put it as an agenda item on any of our agendas that we feel we need to talk about things, for sure. I know where to find them, so.
And you know where to find us.
What's to their chagrin.
So just for planning, your year, that page 6, you might wanna incorporate
Oh, yeah.
those dates into your calendar.
Probably us, not them.
When you say February/March, that's
Right.
February and March or December?
It's an and/or.
And/or, okay,
Tentative.
Probably an or, yeah.
okay,
And that's more, I think, dependent on schedule and
gotcha.
I know that we need to-
either, if we need to do two on any of the topics, we could use our floating meetings for those two. My guess is when we get kind of closer to the finished product, when we're gonna,
we'll get the
This
agenda, but I'll
Just
write
helps
down.
everybody plan, that way nobody's saying, why are we having this meeting at the last minute?
This is
And we'll let Kevin and Bob know also.
December 19th.
There's one thing I want to bring up real quick, I just thought of this, I heard the rumblings about a year ago of, you have that rail line that runs into Manchester into the north end, and possibly converting that to commuter rail. Whether that's dead in the water or that's something that really is DOT driven.
yeah.
Reason I'm bringing this up, because you have that spur that comes up into South Windsor and East Hartford.
Mhm.
And that would be certainly beneficial for transportation-oriented development if somehow this transpires, but I don't know whether that's rumor-based or that's something that's coming.
I haven't heard anything. I do know that DOT had a plan to expand CT Fast Track to the east of the Connecticut River. It wouldn't necessarily be, dedicated like it is on the west side, but enhanced service. So that'll be something I can look into and kind of see what the plans are there. I think the idea was that it would be kind of higher frequency. I know Buckland area was one of the nodes that they were targeting. But to the extent that it comes actually into South Windsor, I'm not sure, but I'll
Yeah, I think it
certainly
was
take a
really gonna
look.
stay right on the perimeter. Right at, like, the Buckland, we have the park and ride over there, I think that was like the.
We're basically gonna go to stores and down to Hartford,
Over the
through
mall too, I think, wait a minute.
the mall areas.
It'd be nice to go to stores.
Yeah, it was gonna get to stores, that's what it was.
That's a good idea.
Then COVID hit, I think, and that kind of-
Yeah.
Threw everything
That was
into
the
a
last
little
I
bit.
heard of it actually, so.
Yeah, it's been a while, so. Great, thank you.
Everybody.
So,
Thank you,
on
guys.
this meeting schedule, could we add this to our list of regular meetings so we don't have to issue a special meeting every time, or?
No,
already
because
adopted
we
our
already
release.
adopted it.
So we'd want it to be a special meeting, cause it's gonna be special, it's gonna be special to what we're gonna talk about, topical.
And it'll just be that we're
Well, I
talking about.
understand, but I mean, you can always revise your list of meetings with the clerk. Just a thought.
Be careful, I mean, I think you got statutory timeframes that work off scheduled meetings, you'd wanna make sure you didn't have date of receipt.
But you also have it in your bylaws where your regular meetings are scheduled, right? Your bylaws state that you'd be changing your bylaw. I think we keep them as special meetings, it's simple.
Birthday.
Whatever works, that's great. If you want to do 6:30, that's fine too, you know.
Yeah.
The special meeting, we're not
Yeah,
necessarily
we
bound
could
to
do a
7
different
o'clock,
time
so.
if people want, yeah.
Especially in the winter.
Can we do 4:30? We don't have to decide that today, so.
Okay.
There are some working stiffs on this board.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right.
Tuesdays is my Hartford day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The white in the middle there, they'll turn that on.
Thank you.
Not in the middle, there you go. No, I guess not. I guess it's just, there you go. Far left.
So I was asking that we have just a very short discussion with the subdivision subcommittee and other people shouldn't be participating.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, if we go to the next item, I just have a brief update for you.
Number 2, right? in
Right,
our
yeah,
Yep.
number
agenda.
2. Yeah, so what I'm gonna pass out to you guys is, I talked to, let you know on the different committees, but this is kind of working backwards from our moratorium, it's kind of the target dates. You know, assuming we're gonna get out of the moratoriums on time, when we have to publish legal notices, when we have to do public hearings, when we have to get regulations to CROG, that kind of thing. Obviously, our residential comes offline about a month ahead of the warehouse one. So under this timetable, we'd be looking to send draft regulations in the beginning of January to CROG, related to residential. To that end, we have, all 3 subcommittees have one more meeting during the month of December scheduled currently. You'll have a set of regulations at those meetings that'll hopefully be close to final draft that we can, you know, and again, sending something off to CROG doesn't mean it has to be the end all. It's, you know, what we're going to public hearing with. The whole idea is to see how it needs to change or whatever. So, what Caitlin and I have been doing is putting together a chart. And so a chart will accompany a document, and this chart is highlighting the section that's being either changed, modified, or added. And it's saying kind of briefly the purpose of it. And then you'll have a document that'll go behind it, that'll be a red line document that the public will be able to follow. What I've done is I've done the sequence of the zoning regulations, so this follows the sequence of the zoning. I have one for the subdivision regulations as well. So that's gonna kind of be the packet of zoning regulations that will be going to hearing. Again, what I'd like to do is, over this next month, finalize the drafts and get you guys these drafts in the early part of January, with the target date of the first meeting in February, the second Tuesday of February, having the public hearing on residential. At Bart's request, there will be also a text amendment that extends the moratorium so that if we have to hedge our bets and we're in the middle of hearings and we aren't ready to close, you know, have the moratorium, it'll be something that'll have gone to CROG and be ready to take to a hearing if you need to. So I'll have that drafted as well. So that's kind of the status where we are. We've done a lot of work last year, so I am having a couple conversations with some other planners that have some inclusionary zoning regulations in their communities to see how they put them in, what kind of feedback I can bring to you related to that. That seems to be one of the trickier areas of the regulation updates that we're doing. I'm gonna be reaching out, and I have reached out to some of the folks that I know that'll be interested in the warehouse text amendments, both developers and residents, kind of letting them know where we are, and in early January, gonna be kind of sharing some more information with them on that. So I think we're in pretty good shape heading into the end of the year here, getting our work together. So any questions you have, I'm meeting with the landscape architect later this week to try to nail down some buffer illustrations and samples that we can have for our regulations with some defined buffers. So kind of all working on different levels but coming together. So I don't know if any specific questions on anything, but just kind of an update of where we are and kind of where we're heading.
And I gotta say it, I appreciate everything Michelle's doing, cause this is all in addition to her normal work. And she's really working hard to give us agendas that meet our needs to move forward with these. So hats off.
It's been a
And
challenging
you know,
year.
Bart, I mean, you're meeting with all of these subcommittees, and so you must wake up every morning and say, is this the day this week when I don't have a meeting?
Yeah, yeah.
Caitlin keeps us on
I'm
task.
glad I'm retired.
I know. So that's really all I just wanted to share
Thanks,
with you
this
where we
is-
were,
this
so.
is good.
Every time
Nice
I'm
job.
working twice as much.
Okay, do we have any,
Nope, I'm all
Okay.
set, nothing else. Yeah.
any bonds? No bonds, right?
Nope.
Minutes, we had one set of minutes. I had one very minor correction on page 16. And it is where Commissioner Quarishi was speaking in the second paragraph. He confirmed that the 80% of units would be affordable units and questioned why the applicant, instead of would, can't, would be the word I suggest, can't make 100% of them affordable. And they explained why, but I just wanted to get his question a little bit clearer documented, that's all. Anyone else have any other changes, or if not, we'll accept these by consensus? Agreed?
Great.
Okay, old business. I just wanna take a minute to report on the quad board meeting. We did have our first meeting for that. It was on November 30th, I believe. And our next meeting is coming up December 21st, 6 p.m., right here in the Madden Room. It was really a meeting where we got our feet wet, meeting the other representatives from the other boards. They did want to elect officers, so we went through that. Stephen King is the chairman, I'm the vice chair, and our secretary is Amanda Poma. Old business, we didn't have any new business. We talked about our purpose of the subcommittee, and we're gonna be going through the exercise of doing a type of mission statement, and decide what our responsibilities are. It really is about communication. We wanna bring things from the quad board meeting back to our commissions and some of our commission information back to the quad board, so everybody communicates a little bit better. Of course, we have state statutes, and it almost seemed like they want, or a few of the members wanted to set what our plan of conservation and development is at these quad board meetings. And I made it clear that we're going through the process of that now, and anybody who would like to participate in that will have the opportunity. Kevin attended also, and talked some about the Board of Ed and how their budget is a very large chunk of the town budget. It's gonna be interesting, and it appears we're meeting on the third Wednesday of each month, except for August. No meeting in August. So I'll let you know more as we get along. I did mention that we had approved the storage building, the fourth floor climate-controlled storage building. And there were some people happy about that, some knew that it was out there, and others didn't. So it's really about sharing information. So that's,
I just have a question. Since communication seems to be the first goal, I'm sure there are gonna be others. Would there be any communication offered up that's not in a minutes on the website for that commission or board that you can envision?
Not that I can think of
Okay.
right now.
Thanks.
Did you, oh, I thought you were waving or something. Okay, all right, any other questions or? Okay, then we'll move right along. That's it, old business, any other old business? Hearing none? Motion to adjourn would
I
be in
move we
order.
adjourn.
Second.
We have motion and a second, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody.